It's one of the largest armed conflicts that humanity known. A deadly war that involved tens of millions of fighters, mostly majority around the world. Let's retrace on a map, a summary of the main events of World War III. Australia as democratic state while political unstable. It is independent from the British Commonwealth of Nations and is an absolutely owned state. The parties in the parliament, speculate. Left-wing the CPA, Australian Communist Socialists, and right-wing the NPA, Nationalist Social Liberalists. Australia sees a rise of nationalist social liberalism. This allows the rise of power of the Sozi-Party, NPA, with leader Michael McCormack and the national leader and Vice Party chief John Smith at its helm. Despite the strict conditions imposed upon Australia after the democracy, the new totalitarian regime resets the country and restores the military service. The country begins an aggressive foreign policy with the dream of uniting Elvish race and all Australian English and Dak Pidgin dialect-speaking people. Vanuatu, despite its still victory with the Allies, is frustrated by the amount of territory it gained after the democracy. Vanuatu begins an invasion of New Caledonia. The Federated States of Micronesia begins to align with nationalist Australia. The so-called Micronesian League. The two countries to get closer diplomatically. In Asia, Pakistan continues its expansionist policy. The Pakistani foreign policy is allied with Iran, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. Altogether is the so-called Middle Eastern or Muslim prosperity sphere, and there are Pakistan and Iran the strongest power. Australia is now powerful enough to launch its territorial expansion. Papua New Guinea returned to Australia. It first annexed Solomon Islands with support from local nationalist party. Next, the west of Papua is invaded. The Republic of Palau becomes an Australian satellite state while Samoa grows closer diplomatically. Australia declares the Argentinian Republic and South American Union the occupation and invasions and a plan to carve up Oceania. It then attacks Tuvalu, which provokes French Sea Departments and indirect France and New Zealand to declare war, making beginning of World War III. Although the Australian forces are concentrated in the east, the Allied troops do not take initiative in the west. Instead, New Zealand and France try to cut the strategic iron ore route that passes through Kiribati and supplies the Australian military industry. Australia reacts by invading Tokelau and Kiribati. Within days the country captures Nauru. New Zealandian forces retreat in the face of this Australian military prowess, and the Australian army bears down to Auckland. The New Zealandian force is defeated and an armistice is signed. Australia occupied the North Island of New Zealand. The South Island of them is a satellite state. The Chatham Island and the New Zealandian territory in the Antarctica is under the control of the new government. The New Zealandian general declares free New Zealand, which continues to fight Australian Molo. The Argentinian Republic seizes Chile and automatically the Easter Island. With the Argentinian allies Brazil and Peru is the South American Union. Australia, Vanuatu and Pakistan combine to form the Axis power. In East Timor and Southeast Asia begins it agree to allies and fighting between Australians and allies. The Australian army to invade East Timor and Polynesia in the east. Everywhere in Oceania, the resistance is organized as partisans formed especially in Polynesia, New Caledonia and Kiribati. Axis forces launch to attack the Argentinian Republic and the South American Union. The bulk of the Australian troops, well equipped and motorized, rush to the east. To support the Argentinians, allies, USA, occupy Mexico, which he opens up a supply route through the Andes. Australian armies arrive in Santiago and begins a siege of the city and cause millions of death. Further east, Australian troops stop at the gate of Buenos Aires, where they suffer in harsh cold in the Andes. In Asia, Pakistan occupies Afghanistan. Iran occupies Azerbaijan and Armenia. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan are satellite states of Iran. Jordan and Saudi Arabia are allied to a double empire and occupies Palestine, Iraq and Arabian Gulf states. The Maghreb states enjoy Pakistani Empire, and Greater Iran. To counter its expansionist policy, the United States imposes upon it an embargo on oil and steel. In response, the Pakistani troops conduct a surprise attack on United States and Morocco, that's an allies of them. The USA also provides supplies to the South American Union, which continues resisting the Australian advance. Pakistan, for its part, conquers new territories in the Middle East. In the west of the Australian Empire is built the Indic Wall, a series of military installations protecting the coast from invasion of Western forces. USA landing in Kiribati. In Vanuatu and New Caledonia finds itself caught between two fronts. In the east, Axis forces try to cut the supply route of the Argentinian Andes. But for the first time, the Australian offensive undergoes a majority military setback. The Argentinians take the initiative and counterattack. The Argentinian Republic and the South American Union advance rapidly westward, forcing the Australian army to concentrate on the front. The Argentinians land in New Caledonia and Auckland. New Zealand is free from the Australians and New Zealand enjoy the Allies. In the east as northwest, countries are liberated, or switch camps. Countries that declared war on Australia and Pakistan and to get the consequences. The Argentinians reaching as first Sydney and New South Wales. Somewhat later, New Zealand, USA and France, so the Allies reaching Australia. Result, Australia surrenders. The American invades Maghreb states, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Iran. USA reaching Pakistan in the south. India is free of his partisans and Russia invades east and north of Pakistan. Pakistan and his allies surrender and making the end of World War III. Australia with Papua New Guinea and Solomon Islands are divided of the four Allies forces.